Let's try and tie all of this together. Political analyst Talha Kose now joins us live. Mr. Kose, good to speak to you as always. First, let's pick up with the big picture. There is due to be a meeting between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and President Vladimir Putin of Russia on the 5th of March. Just give us a sense of what they will be talking about. And the situation on the ground seems to be changing by the hour.
Yeah, it's one of the few face-to-face meetings in the last couple of months, especially with regard to the Syrian issue. Two presidents were talking about other issues, energy, Libya, and other issues. But unfortunately, for the last 6 months, there was an increasing escalation in the Idlib area and violation of the Sochi agreement. So Turkey has been pushing forward to return to the Sochi agreement and return to the line, that the confliction line. So this have been changed with regard to the Russian and regime attacks in the last several months, especially in the last 2 months. So Turkey's expectation is to return to the deconfliction zone and Sochi agreement and withdrawal of the regime forces. For the last couple of weeks, Russian and Turkish ministries of defense and ministries of foreign affairs have contacted several times. They negotiated on the escalation and ceasefire lines, but they didn't reach an agreement. And unfortunately, with regard to this escalation and in the last attack against the Turkish soldiers, with that to the death of 34 soldiers, the situation escalated further. And it seems that Turkey is willing to escalate the situation further in order to return to the status quo of the Sochi agreement. And regime and the Russian side are not backing. So this may may lead further escalation in the coming weeks. So we expect that with this meeting of two leaders, the escalation will be limited and there may be some interim agreement in this situation. However, taking into account contact in the couple of weeks, it seems that it will be very difficult. Turkish side is really angry. President Erdogan is also angry because of the attacks that led to that of Turkish soldiers. In the aftermath of this attack, there is a very strong Turkish attack, and which was very effective with the use of air bombardment, so which changed the situation on the field. However, there is still a lot to be done in order to return to the Sochi status quo. So Russian side and the regime wants to keep the de facto lines in the field, and Turkey expects to return to the Sochi line, and there is huge gap between the actors. And in the couple of weeks, there is also increased this mistrust between the parties, and this mistrust also reflected in the contacts of the officials on both sides. It will really be difficult to even to restore the trust between the presidents, but I am hoping if they reach an interim agreement, the situation may de-escalate to a certain extent on the ground. But reaching a deal will be more difficult because there is still a huge gap between the expectations of the parties.
Mr. Kose, you mentioned the possibility of there being an escalation. Just what kind of form could that escalation take? There are already airstrikes, there are many drones in the air and Turkish units supporting the Syrian National Army. Just what do you think that escalation could look like?
I mean, in the after the February 27th, Turkey increased its drone attacks, and these drone attacks really affected very negatively the Syrian army's image on the ground, and they expected some support from the Russian side. So without Russian support, and President Erdogan said, let us face with the regime. Please do not intervene because the regime is violating the agreement. So after the 27th February, Turkish attacks were very efficient on the ground, which led to destruction of armored vehicles, some planes, and death of lots of regime soldiers. So Turkey may continue these attacks, but this also, puts some pressure on Russian side from the side of Syrian army. So they are pushing Russia to intervene and close the airspace. So this may lead to a further escalation if Turkish side hits a Russian jet or Russian military on the ground, or vice versa. This may further escalate the situation. So both sides say we don't target each other, but as we know that there are Russian soldiers and Russian planes on Syria, and Turkey is effectively on the ground. So it will be very difficult to prevent any escalation if a contact comes between those two. So both leaders, both militaries express their concern about this situation. They say that we do not target each other, but even the opposition groups or the regime may target Turkey, or opposition groups may target Russia, and this may turn into unexpected escalation. So both parties are concerned about further escalation, but the situation on the ground is fertile ground for such events.
Mr. Kose, you say that there may well be then an interim agreement. This situation in Idlib has been running on now for many years. It was always going to be quite intractable. An interim agreement is not quite enough, is it? There needs to be some kind of conclusion. How do you see this situation being concluded in the years that come?
Well, for the last 6 months, the increased Russian and regime attacks actually violated the Sochi Agreement. One of the major objectives of the Sochi Agreement was to lead, ceasefire, de-escalation, and turning into the political process. So Turkey was expecting the political process and negotiations to start and lead to a final solution to the Syrian crisis. But the recent de-escalation and regimes efforts to find a military solution to the situation and destruction of the Idlib area unfortunately prevented opening of the opportunities in the political sphere. So for Turkey, ceasefire, return to the escalation lines and initiation of the political negotiation process are the expectations. And if we look at the Russian and regime sides, they still seem to be interested to find a military solution to the situation. They expect depopulation of the Idlib area and bombardment of the entire area is their, I think, major expectation. There is increasing international pressure on Russia and the regimes, so which is good sign, but there is still no intervention to prevent such a further escalation. So Turkey has some capabilities, but some limitations as well. So Turkey cannot itself prevent the entire, to stop the entire effort of military solution. So if there is an increasing international pressure and also support for Turkey's operations with the air defense, and if some safe zone is established in the interim period, this may lead to a political solution. But regime side doesn't seem to be ready for a political solution for Syrian case.
Okay, Mr. Talha Kose, thank you very much for that analysis.